Cut the dang music. What's up, everybody? Happy Saturday. Hope you had a great week so far. Let's start this off by talking about the zone for great libido on TRT. Is my mic working and shit here? Okay, everything looks good. Yeah, look, I think one of the reasons that, there's a couple reasons that people have like significant problems dialing in on testosterone, specifically regarding sexual function. And, the number one reason is estrogen. There's a lot of bad advice out there, and there's people telling you that, you don't need to control this hormone that is going to go in excess on most doses of TRT unless you're in the ultra low band of dosing. So that's the first piece of bad advice that steers people wrong. Secondarily, but I think less significantly, because these days people are coming around to recognizing how critical DHT is, but there is still a contingent of folks that think that DHT is not important. You need a lot of DHT. Excuse me, enough DHT. And that usually is above mid-range DHT. You're probably better off on the high end or slightly super physiologic. But the last thing, and this is a thing that doesn't get a whole lot of attention that prevents people from dialing in and getting in the zone, is recognizing that the zone is extremely narrow. Yeah, for most people. Yeah, there's a TRT doctor. I wish I could find the video to just like clip it for you guys that, is quoted as saying, we need to be in an extremely narrow zone, specifically with estrogen. On testosterone, in order for everything down there to work. And it's just so true. And the problem people have is multifold. It's like getting in that zone and then staying in the zone. And what often happens for folks is they'll blow through the zone. Okay, you try a new protocol, and then on day 3 of that protocol, you wake up with an erection, you're horny all day, your erections are great for penetrative sex, sensation is amazing. But then the next day, it's about 75% of what it was, and then the next day 50%, and then 25%, and then you're back in the fuck zone where you can't get it up, or it's all lukewarm. You blew through the window. This is very critical for people to understand. When you're in that window, the first thing to do, if you can manage it, I know people have busy schedules and whatever, is to go get labs on total testosterone and estradiol right when you're in the window so that you understand exactly where you need to be. And then you build your protocols around that in the future to stay there. Importantly, though, it's like if you're in that window and then you blow past it, chances are you're not on the right dose, you're not on the right protocol. You were just temporarily in that window. So then you've got to really sit down and think. Ask chat, hire me, watch some of our content, figure out what you need to do to shift back into that window. Skip a dose, usually is what kind of happens there. If you blow through the window, you have great sexual function, you're trying to dial in, and then you fall out of it, but you recognize that based on the pharmacokinetics of what you might have injected or applied to the scrotum or whatever, that you're still in the peak of that dose, then you probably need to skip a dose to get right back down into that window. And then you just recalculate your TRT dose, HCG dose, et cetera, to keep you in that window. This is the biggest problem with folks besides estrogen, right? And listening to the bullshit on the web about, not managing estrogen. It's like that window is extremely small. It's a fine window. Because if you think about this, us as natties, yeah, we do peak and trough throughout the day, but the estrogen doesn't really move all that much. It doesn't shift significantly one way or the other. It's kind of stable. It's usually like 25 picograms per milliliter. It's 600 test and 65 DHT. And that's a great place to be. If you need the extra anabolism, just use Anavar. So just understand that, like, if you go and you do these massive changes, you're like, oh, you know what? I felt better on, like, I had better libido, but it wasn't great. And I had better erections, but it wasn't great on, like, 50 milligrams of prop every other day. Then you do that. And then, like, day 3, everything works. You're like, holy shit, this is the protocol. And then it starts to falter. You blew in and out of the zone because your adjustment was too much of an adjustment. The last thing I'll end on is, if you pass through the zone, recognize you don't have to do a whole lot to get back in it. Small changes. Have your dose the next day or skip a dose entirely. If you went in and you realize, like, you're actually at the trough of your previous injection or application of test, and that's where you blew out of the window, then you just need to add a little bit of test. It's all about microdialing, if I could coin that phrase in TRT. And that's essentially what I do, regarding coaching. So please keep that in mind. Also wanted to say that, listen, we have had a pretty busy couple weeks since I launched all the new coaching programs. The most popular program right now is the Blueprint Consult. Okay. It's a single session call with me where I'll generate an entire document, a TRT protocol tracker, 3 to 5 action routes for you to go execute. And I'll listen to your situation for 30 minutes on a fact-finding call and get to the bottom of why sexual function is not good, and set you up with a tailored protocol with a TRT protocol tracker so that you can go and execute and fix it. That's the first option here. That is the most popular. I think we booked like 7 of those in the last 2 weeks since we launched it. So please go get that, livecortex.com. It's no ongoing coaching, so there's no commitment. And it's a hell of a lot cheaper than the rest of this stuff. 3 months, of course. Sexual function restoration intensive. This is where you're working one-on-one with me. 6-month advanced sexual function restoration. This is for the really, really pesky stuff that does not respond to whatever you do. Those are where I really like getting people back on track. You go book all that stuff, livecortex.com. All right, let's get to questions. Brothers, hope you guys are doing great. Hope we've had a great weekend. Big Z Baller, thanks for the super chat, brother. I'm on 3 clicks of 100 milligram cream, 100 IU HCG daily. Okay, it's a little low on the cream. Peak labs show 1050 and E233. All right, so that's like 6 or 7 hours after administration, looks like. Trough shows 296. Yeah, that's about right with cream. E2 pending, and I don't feel good. Well, when is the trough? The trough for you is the next morning, or the trough for you is at nighttime? Like the day of application, it's like at night potentially. You know, cream, it peaks. You stay physiologic for a while, and then toward the end of the night, you start to go down, and then all night you're going down, you know, and then you should still have enough test to feel pretty good in the morning. But I mean, right away when you wake up, you should apply the test. That's what I do. Because I feel for sure myself troughing at nighttime. I feel it like 7, 8 o'clock. You know, I start to feel tired, and I don't really mind it because at that point, I'm winding down for the night. You know, me and my girl are watching YouTube videos, or we've found a good movie, which is rare. Movies just like 1 out of 100 are good, man. I'm tired of it. And I just accept that because that trough is so important for me personally to keep estrogen where it needs to be while DHT is still high. So like I still wake up with morning wood even if I'm troughing. You know, I'm still horny and erections are still great for penetrative sex. So, you know, on your peak, you're about the max for what most men can tolerate regarding sexual function and estradiol. I don't think this is a terrible protocol here, but you could do one of two things, man. You could play with bumping it up to 4 pumps. You know, your peak on E2 is going to be like 37 to 40. You might be able to tolerate that. And then your trough will be, at least at total T, probably like 400 or something. And then you'll physically feel better and you won't have to deal with any negative feelings regarding the trough. But I would say that if sexual function's not good at this stage, it's a hard one, you know, because you're kind of right in the good zone there. So, I mean, really the only option actually is for you to bump it up to 4 clicks of 100 milligram cream and look at the numbers again and see if that just resolves the problem. You might need a quick peak in serum E2, you know, that goes up to 37 or 40, but which goes back down to maybe 35. And then you're okay slightly above the top end of Quest's range, you know, in that 35 to 40 zone. When you look at your E2 here, I bet it's actually going to be only like 29. It might even still be 30. It's not going to drop all that much. So that would be your only option, dude. And if for some reason, like, you know, when you move up to 4 pumps, that'll fix the trough feeling where you don't feel good. If you can't get that E2 where it needs to be, you are over aromatizing, I would suggest. Because 3 clicks of cream is not a lot. And you probably want to just throw in 25 milligrams Proviron to control that and, you know, give you a little more DHT-like effect, although you probably don't need it with this cream. And then that'll probably inch that estrogen down in the zone, and then you'll be good. Rick Diaz, have you ever tried or had someone try a protocol of, say, 180 to 120 of a long ester, followed by low-dose 10% cream? Yeah, I have. Yeah, I have done that myself, and it worked. Yeah, the one that worked for me, but it ultimately was a little convoluted, and I was like, I could probably make this better. Was 98 milligrams a test, so 100 a week. It was doing daily intramuscular injections with a 5/8 inch needle, and then I was putting a pump of 100 milligram cream on the scrotum every day. And that, though, I had 330 IU of HCG every day. It just worked. It just worked. It wasn't the best. It was convoluted. It was kind of, you know, too much, like just, you know, whatever. It's like an inject and then put the cream on. It's like a pain in the ass. So I ultimately ended up switching that to cream every day, 5 pumps, 3 on the forearm, 2 on the scrotum, 166 IU of HCG a day, and then every 6 to 9 days, an injection of 40 milligrams of cypionate. It just sets up the perfect stable baseline, then a peak and trough in androgens, a little bit of estradiol. I hover around my zone with estrogen and like Pretty much every day I'm in the zone regarding sexual function, but that'd be 2 days of the week where I don't have nocturnal erections. But I mean, I'm fucking dialed in and feel good. So yeah, it's not a bad idea. I've done something like that before, and it can work. You know, I got to break down for you guys, and I'm going to discuss this on probably a long video, just a long form video. Why sometimes even on cream and on the right dose that gets you in the right zone, you need a hybrid. You know, you need a little bit more of a peak and trough, and you need this infusion of a long ester specifically in some cases, just to get you right in the perfect zone, and then you go back down. I'm still trying to figure out exactly why that is, because you would think, oh, well, I could just add a little more cream and I'll be in that perfect zone. But the pharmacokinetics of cream versus cypionate are different, and sometimes the stability of just a little more of everything is what dials people in perfectly. Dream Chaser, the sublingual pregnenolone at 10 milligrams daily has a profound effect on me. It's incredible. Motivation, energy, music sounds better, and sleep improved. Why is this happening to me? Yeah, you know what? Beats me, brother. Beats me. Pregnenolone or Pregnenolone. I think you're referring to Pregnenolone. It's a hard. I always actually misspell it because it's such a ridiculous word. It's hard to say, dude. Yeah, I mean that hormone modulates GABA A receptor activity, I think allosterically, positively allosterically, which means it enhances the effect of GABA at the GABA A receptor. Yeah, via modifying the receptor in a way which, sort of increases the density of the receptor, increases the genetic response of the binding action of GABA to the receptor. So I think that's what's probably happening here. And it's giving you a little more of that GABA, which is probably, inhibiting some other excessively firing neurotransmitter that is like mucking your mood up, like glutamate. Glutamate can do that. Jay Futrix, hey Ryan, I'm running a fertility experiment, adding 250 IU of HCG a day and 150 IU of HMG a week. How much percentage would you estimate test prop need to be lower to keep E2 reasonable? Well, I mean, at 15 milligrams a day, I suppose it all depends on where your bloods go on 15 milligrams a day of prop. In rare instances, that'll take you above 1500, which is fucking crazy, and an over response, a hyper response. But in most instances, it's going to take you like 600 tests and E2 at like 25, or lower. So if you're on the high end in terms of the response of that dose of prop, then you probably can't get away with 250 IU of HCG and 150 IU of HMG, and you might just want to run 100 IU of HCG. If you're on the lower end, in terms of total test and estradiol on that dose of prop, well, then you should be able to tolerate that fine. Yeah. Ultimately, man, you're going to have to run the bloods. I would run them on peak so that you see how far it's going up, and then run them on trough too. And you'll notice the estrogen's probably not all that different, peak versus trough, but the total T and DHT numbers will be. That would be my suggestion on that, brother. See where you go. It all depends on where your numbers are going on that dose of prop. I mean, for me, I'm at that like 650, 700 and E2 at 25 at 25 milligrams of prop a day. Yeah, like 25 is actually just a little too little. 27, 30 is kind of perfect for me. Because sometimes I can go into seeming estrogen deficiency. It's really an antidiuretic hormone deficiency because there's a little less estrogen, which helps you make that. And then I can't retain water, and that's like you're peeing all the time. It's annoying as hell. Electrolytes get a little imbalanced and it's a pain in the ass. So I'm just going to have to see. If in the end you can't dial in on prop, just switch to cream. Switch to cream. Yeah. I think that, whether it's cream alone or cream with a small infusion of cypionate, like 20 to 40 milligrams every 6 days or something, people are just going to get the best outcome there. I think there's a disproportionate amount of people that have a difficult time. I should say this, a disproportionate amount of people that can't run 200 milligrams of cypionate with an AI, or 140 of cypionate with a low dose of HCG, and then they fall in range. There's always problems there. The folks that can dose cypionate in like the usual doses, it's rare. It's far and few between. It just doesn't really happen all that often. The number one ester that people come to me on and they have sexual dysfunction is cypionate. That is a data point that is true. It's real. Just something for folks to think about. Rick Diaz, why do you feel as if a trough is better overall rather than steady state levels that most well-known knowns recommend? First of all, if someone's well-known, it doesn't mean shit in this space. It means nothing. You want to look at the people who are not well-known. You can't use well-known as like a criteria for legitimacy. You got to be real careful there. Dave's legit. But I think you can, on steady state, feel great so long as there's not bleed over of the estradiol. Your body is not a machine. And if you keep the same dose of something, you're not going to aromatize to the exact same number. So what I often see when people are at extremely steady state is that when they run the estrogen, call it at peak, it could be 33 one day, but then 2 weeks later on the same dose, it's 37 or 40. And the only reason that I can come up with that happens is you have bleed over of aromatization. You have this cumulative effect, even though you're steady state, of rising estrogen. And sometimes that goes out of control. I mean, you could clock at 35 one day. 2 weeks later on the same dose, you're at 45. How the fuck did that happen? The only logical explanation for that is bleed over of estradiol, because you never get a trough. You never get a trough. How natties work is because natties get a trough. We peak in the morning, we start troughing at night. Estrogen can't accumulate because there's not an aromatizable androgen present 24 fucking hours a day. You generally don't, and that's how our bodies are supposed to work. So, to the greatest extent possible, you want to try to mimic how our bodies work normally as naturals, while still having more anabolism and more energy and more confidence and more masculinity than the average natural. That's what you want to do. Yo, Ryan, what are the use cases for Masteron on TRT? Currently very close, using just tea. Some night nocturnals that wake me up, but no wood. No morning wood. Some nights, no nocturnals, but yes wood. I'm not sure what you're referring to on that last part. Listen, Masteron blocks estrogen receptors, so it doesn't really change the blood levels of estradiol, but it can, just like DHT can, inhibit the effects of estrogen at the tissue level where it ultimately matters. I mean, it's circulating around your blood. Yes, that is a surrogate for what's happening at the tissues, but it can't really tell you what's happening there. Penile tissue, brain tissue, gonadal tissue, that's where it really matters. And if you can block some of that effect with Masteron, well, then you regulate the tissues so that you have a microenvironment of hormones that is conducive to sexual function. And Masteron on the low end, 20, to on the high end, 150 milligrams a week can do that. But you got to be careful. I would not take the advice of like the 1-to-1 ratio. Say you're running 130 a test and you run 130 Masteron, you're probably going to just crush the estrogen at the gene expression level, at the receptor binding level, and at the tissue level, to the point where you feel like you took like a lot of Arimidex, which is not going to be good because your libido will tank. Your erections are probably going to be shitty at that point, and things won't be up to par. John, for those who don't have access to cream, would you say for For some people, Proviron can fill that gap for DHT benefits. It can, yeah, absolutely, yeah. I mean, Proviron dials people in all the time, but with the standard 25 milligram dose, it is only under the condition that your test dose isn't uber high. Because if you are sitting at, like with Cypionate or Enanthate, like 150, 175, 200, with a little bit of HCG, and then estrogen comes to 45 in that case, which would be you being like a normal or a little bit below average aromatizer, you're going to need 50 to 75 milligrams of Proviron to reduce the estrogen enough to get that effect. Now, like you can't just sit with out of the zone estradiol and infuse some DHT derivative, and that will fix it. You need the DHT, but you know, as I've been saying to you folks, estrogen effectively blocks the effect of DHT regarding sexual function. Yeah, it actually messes with androgen receptor binding. In its own estrogen receptor beta pathways, it inhibits the penile erection, and it can inhibit dopamine firing from the arcuate nucleus of the brain, which you need in order to filter dopamine through the pituitary stalk to both inhibit prolactin and to give you libido. So, you know, I mean, this is the kind of shit that the pro-estrogen folks never talk about, and I'm not sure why that part of the literature they haven't gone down, at least to play devil's advocate on their own stances. But too much estrogen, you're not going to be able to block that or stop that effect with DHT or Proviron. But you can use Proviron to get the androgen receptor binding that is like DHT, meaning it stays at the receptor a lot longer and disassociates to a different degree, where it's actually active, inducing androgen receptor mediated gene expression for a higher duration of time. 5 pumps of 100 milligram cream a day, 3 on the forearm bicep, just right here, kind of just put it right here. 2 pumps on the scrotum, 166 IU HCG every day, and then every 6 to 9 days, 40 milligrams of cypionate. Yeah, that is what at this stage keeps my libido revving throughout the duration. Erections are always good for penetrative sex, like at this, like even if I was just on 5 pumps of cream in whatever regard. But, you know, the sensation and libido is not quite great without that extra infusion of cypionate. It just kind of does this and then does this again. Manufacturing your pulse dosing in that case from a stable baseline. It's another reason I'm not a fan of stable baselines. You know, you're lukewarm and you can have sex, but you're not craving it. I want to be fucking craving it. I mean, I've got a beautiful woman with me who has a very high libido. So my libido needs to match hers, man. And so that's where I'm at. Now, look, I've dialed in on like fucking 15 different protocols, but, you know, some of them were convoluted or some of them I wanted to switch for various reasons, and I had to dial some of them in because I'm like either on cycle or cycling down from being on cycle. Like I've dialed in 300 a week of cypionate or anything, but I needed aromacin to be in the zone. Needed the estrogen control. Also, I got no idea how you use half-inch needle in the glute. I don't. I am 12% body fat and need a 1.5 inch. Yeah, and listen, ultimately, if you're injecting less frequently with a long ester, use a 1 inch or 1.5 inch. Upper glute, though, is a little less fatty. You're not putting it like just directly in the fat tissue in the glute. You want to hit the upper glute. That's where you want to hit it. But no, I never suggest a half-inch needle to do intramuscular injections. You are running a great risk of most of the time it maybe pierces the muscle, but you're not getting into the blood vessels of the muscle in the vascular tissue. You're getting the extravascular tissue, which is basically sub-Q. So at least a 5/8 inch needle when you're doing intramuscular injections. And try the upper glute, not the big fatty part of the glute. That'll be better. Yeah, I would not do 4 clicks, 2 pumps in the AM and 1 in the PM. I wouldn't do that. No, I think you try running the 4. If I remember your super chat quickly, try running the 4, see where you're at. Use Proviron to balance out if there's extra estrogen there. Yeah, I mean, you're running the risk of during the day at 2 pumps of 100 milligrams of feeling like dog shit. It's just not a good idea. Joe, does running 500 IU of HCG twice a week have advantages over daily microinjections? Would you take the AI with the HCG if it's 2x weekly? Running 500 IU twice a week is just likely to end you with a bolus of estradiol, which you don't want in the 2 to 3 days after dosing it. So microinjections keep that peak of estrogen lower, which is ultimately what you want. Also, it's like the effects from HCG, considering its half-life of like 1.9 days or something, they're only really, it's like you lose stability when you do it every 3.5 days. You'll be doing a little bit of this, you'll be doing a little bit of that. And with HCG, I don't necessarily think that's a great idea to peak and trough on HCG. I think you want to have that as stable as possible. Big Z is saying, I see you here a lot, bro. How the nocturnals, blah, blah, blah. Can exemestane or Proviron up blood pressure? Proviron can, yes. Proviron, is an androgen and has the ability to increase your blood pressure. Exemestane, no, not really. No, that tends to really be either inconsequential to your blood pressure or lower it a little bit because it's lowering estrogen. Hello, Ryan. How are you? What supplements are you currently taking? At the moment, nothing like significant. I run 20 milligrams of DHEA a day. I run Life Extension's Bioactive B complex every day. I run 6 KIU of vitamin D every day. I run about, I want to say 2 grams of lecithin a day. And that's it. Yeah, no other supplements. I mean, if I have any reflux from a bad eating habit, a bad eating choice, a bad food choice, then I'll take some enteric-coated peppermint with ginger and I think it's fennel in it, which will fix that problem almost instantly. Otherwise, I really don't take a lot of supplements these days. I'm basically just taking what is necessary, and that's all. Bro, Proviron doesn't do anything for me sexual function-wise, but Masteron does. Masteron does everything you say Proviron does for you. Is this genetic makeup? No, I think it's just a matter of the dose of it and the pharmacokinetics. You could get Proviron to do what Masteron does. Definitely. But you're probably going to have to dose it higher. I think folks, I really want to make the point about Proviron that, especially if you're on somewhat higher, even medium, lukewarm doses of test, like you're going to need more than 25 to control the E2. But if you're blocking the receptor with Masteron, it's acting more powerfully in an estrogen blocking capacity. That's what's happening here. Proviron does nothing for me either. I've been running 50 milligrams a day for 6 months, 0 hair loss. So that's interesting. Probably my estrogen blocking it. Yeah, everything will be blocking this. Yeah, probably. Who knows, though? If you're getting no hair loss, it might not even be working the way that you might be metabolizing it too quickly. Because Proviron's pretty fucking not hair safe, dude. It's just usually not. Yeah, I mean, I've seen kind of recently, like... folks will not be dialed in on TRT until they have enough DHT and, of course, estrogen's in range. Once that happens, they start shedding hair, but they never shed hair on TRT prior. Then they're dialed in, their dick works, their libido is crazy, but they're shedding a little bit of hair. So it might not be actually working. But in the context of your protocol, it's like, where is estradiol? What is the protocol? In some cases, 50 milligrams is just not enough for 175 milligrams of test, or E2 at 50, whatever the dose is. I just went over that before. Hey, Ryan, I'm pretty new to these stuffs. Have a quick question. What is the minimum free testosterone level that, in your opinion, for us to feel good? I think it's largely irrelevant. I think you want to be mid-range, to feel good. But the numbers that really matter are DHT and estradiol, DHT and estradiol. Now, in terms of energy and anabolism, you want the testosterone high normal if you can, or super physiologic if you're going to use an AI or DHT derivative to control estrogen. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of shit that to me, like, listen, I want to simplify everything in my life and look at what actually matters, the critical things, rather than, have 5 different numbers to manage and think about and try to dial in, because that's going to be hard to do. DHT and estradiol with total test at least at 600 is where you want to be. Now, again, if you can take an AI and stuff, the total test can go higher and you'll feel great. What's the benefit or difference between a cream-based protocol with SIP as an add-on or a daily SIP protocol with cream as an add-on? I think the benefit of cream-based protocol is just automatically more DHT. That's just it. You know, if you're running 5 pumps of cream with a little bit of cypionate, you're getting more DHT than 115 milligrams of cypionate in 1 pump of cream. And that's the answer to that, which means better erections, more rigidity in the erections, more sustenance in the erections, more masculine assertive features, you know, a better ratio of DHT to estradiol. That's the answer to that question. Regimatic, thanks for the super chat, brother. My opinion on 12.5 milligrams of enclomiphene, 1 times daily, and 80 milligrams testosterone, cypionate twice a week. Well, is that 40 and 40, or is it 80 and 80? You should specify that. My opinion is that is a protocol that doesn't make sense. Enclomiphene is a PCT drug. It's a drug you would use after a steroid cycle to get your natural function back, or if for some reason you are on TRT and want to get off of it. It's the only time I feel like anyone should be using enclomiphene. It is not TRT. It's not testosterone replacement therapy. You are blocking estrogen receptors, which long-term is not a good idea to do. And it comes with fucking side effects. You want the most efficient route where everything is controllable by you to getting your hormones in the right place. And clomiphene, via blocking estrogen receptors, you can't control that one fucking bit, man. I think that's a bad protocol. Go on strictly testosterone. Use HCG for the testicles. Stop blocking the estrogen receptors. Find the dose or the combination of things that dials you in. Is it bad taking finasteride and TRT at the same time? Yes, you are nullifying a lot of the DHT, which is going to benefit you greatly. It's actually the major part of what gives you sexual function as a man and on TRT. When you take finasteride on TRT, some people think, oh, I can take finasteride as long as I'm just like taking TRT. It's nonsense. You're still disabling 5-alpha reductase enzymes. So it's even worse on TRT because then you have more androgens. And guess what it's going to convert to disproportionately, meaning more so than DHT? Estrogen. That's what it does. It's the whole problem with PFS. These guys block DHT synthesis. And so the testosterone gets metabolized into estradiol in an excessive way, which gives you fucking ED, sensitivity loss, libido loss, and in some extreme cases that I've seen with clients, gender dysphoria. See, probably why I am so truthful about estrogen is because I deal with a lot of PFS people, you know, but men on TRT too, that when the estrogen goes over, things get really fucked up. But I've seen I know what estrogen does. I mean, I've had guys question their fucking sexuality because their estrogen was too high. They got it back down. They were their stoic fucking, you know, masculine women seeking selves again. I've seen a lot of crazy shit with estrogen, dude. Is there currently a discount for consulting coaching? Yes, you can use the coupon code 20NOW. 20NOW. It's just the letters. I have Alzheimer's. The numbers 20 and then the word now all together, and it will take 20% off of anything, even the single session consult. But listen, I mean, if you need to book for any long-standing sexual dysfunction and you have the budget, you're still going to save 20%, which is $800 or $900 off of the 3 months and 20% off of the 6 months. So if your situation requires ongoing work and adjustment, then do a coaching package, but use the discount code and you'll get, you know, money off, good bit of money off. It's an entire 20% off the price. Minimum estrogen level for folks to feel good. Minimum? I wouldn't go below 20. Yeah. I would try to stay at 20 to 30. 27 is like a pretty golden number for like anybody, most people. Yeah, I wouldn't go below 20. I mean, there's rare instances in which people need to be like 15. Their body just works that way. It's where they were as a natty. They feel better. Their dick works. They have libido when estrogen's low. I think people have varying sensitivities to estrogen. Generally, we're all the same in that we can't have it over range or significantly over range. But some guys are like, just need to be really, really low on estrogen. And I've seen that too. It's not many guys, but it is something. Johnny Cook, what are the main things to keep an eye out for on blood work when you're adding Primo, Masteron, or EQ so your libido doesn't tank? Well, with Primobolan, it would be estrogen because that will actually lower the number. And therefore, it could nuke your libido via blocking aromatase in the brain and the penile tissue. Masteron or EQ, I don't know if EQ actually lowers the number. I would wager it probably does. Masteron will not. So it's really just about estrogen. Regarding your health, though, HDL and LDL. HDL and LDL. Lehas. Can continuous use of HCG permanently block natural production of testosterone? No, that can't happen. No, people, reference like an error in discerning the studies with HCG saying that it can downregulate testicular function. It actually doesn't do that. It's that testicles start converting to testosterone through different pathways with a lot of HCG, predominantly the DHEA pathway. It's not an actual downregulation. It's just a backdoor activation of a different pathway. You said there's ideal DHT and estradiol ratio. There is no ratio. I mean, you could probably calculate it. The numbers you want to shoot for. Wait a minute. What? Not enough memory to. Hold on. My computer just took a shit. The numbers you want to shoot for are. Hold on. I lost you here. Here we go. The numbers you want to shoot for are mid to high range DHT, 65, 75, 85, 95. Estrogen between 20 and 35. I think enclomiphene with low dose TRT is great. Works for me, but I think the key is using normal amounts of TRT, not TRT plus. At 100 milligrams, it will work, but over 180, it won't work because suppression. Well, there is no specified dose of testosterone that will work for everybody with 12.5 milligrams of enclomiphene a day. So that's just your experience. So you just have to keep that in mind. Otherwise, though, listen, the reason that people get like ocular damage from using enclomiphene is because it blocks estrogen receptors like in your eyeballs, like retina maybe or whatever. And people tend to like have not full-blown vision loss, but they have like these blue streaks in their vision. They have persistent eye floaters and their vision starts to fucking change negatively. Because it's not very selective, it's blocking it in the pituitary, but it's blocking it elsewhere too. So, that on top of the increased blood clot risk, as well as its stark inefficiency compared to a dialed-in TRT protocol, makes it objectively inferior to just a great TRT protocol. Thanks for the super chat, brother. The estrogen regular test, it picks up other chemicals that could register as estradiol. So you're not getting an accurate reading. And when, trying to dial in TRT, considering we have to be in these very small windows, narrow windows of estradiol, you want the most accurate reading you can get. Yeah, you don't want to be running the regular estrogen test. It is just not a good idea. Brent is saying, you said estrogen is one of the most important numbers we should manage besides T and total DHT. Total T and DHT. What's the reason for that? Why is estradiol so important? It's important because at the 50,000 foot view, too low or too high is going to cause sexual dysfunction. Too low is going to cause a lack of joint lubrication, and too low is probably not good for your heart or lipids. Too high, as I said, it blocks arcuate nucleus dopamine release, It's a very important part of your brain that needs to be releasing dopamine for proper sexual function and for prolactin inhibition. I mean, this is why estradiol can increase prolactin if it's like really excessive. In fact, there's studies on this where if you give rats exogenous estradiol, a lot of it, they grow pituitary tumors. It's exactly because of this mechanism. At the same time, estrogen receptor beta pathways are no good for a nitric oxide mediated penile erection, as well as penile base erection blood inflow. It's an inhibitor of it. It modifies androgen receptor binding, estradiol does, at the penile tissue in a negative way. And there's a host of other neurological side effects with excess estradiol, predominantly being feminization. Yeah. Do you know what they give men when they're transitioning to be females? Just think about that for a second. Well, it's not DHT, which is what makes us masculine and makes us men and stuff. Which, by the way, also when they do this, like their erection quality goes to shit and, you know, they start, like, it starts shrinking. They give him estrogen. Those are some of the reasons. I mean, there's, if you were looking at it from the literature, medical literature perspective, it's very clear that excessive estrogen is problematic specifically for erectile function in men, but there's a host of other problems that come along with it too. It needs to be in the right place because of this idea that too high and too low cause problems. You know, there is a homeostatic range for men to be in where we just function good. There's a homeostatic range for a lot of things. You know, your LDL goes too high, you're over the homeostatic range. You start increasing the risk for heart disease. Your HDL goes too low, same thing. There's a homeostatic range for where you're supposed to be. Side effects come about with an excess in mostly everything and a deficiency in mostly everything. Try taking 15,000 IU of vitamin D a day. You're going to go over in vitamin D and you're going to have fucking side effects. Try being at 32 nanograms per deciliter, I think the measurement is, of vitamin D, and you're going to be under and you're going to have problems associated with being deficient in vitamin D. Not least of which is everything's going to get you sick. You know, I want to knock on wood here, but I just don't get fucking sick with 6,000 IU vitamin D. Vitamin D stays high, not super physiologic, high normal, and I just don't get sick. My DHT is already very high on cream, and adding in Proviron just to lower E2 slightly doesn't seem like it would be all that useful. Listen, if estrogen is too high, Proviron still acts as an aromatase inhibitor, just not to the extent that, you know, exemestane or Ribodex would. So it would be useful in that regard. But I mean, if the DHT is sufficient and your only objective is to control estrogen, yeah, I mean, then you might want to use a little bit of aromasin. See, the benefit of using Proviron versus aromasin is it's just not as fucking destructive to the aromatase enzyme as drugs that were made for cancer, you know, like aromatase inhibitor. So you run a lot less of a risk of getting side effects, and you get even more DHT and a different pharmacokinetic profile of the DHT like effect, which feels like, I mean, your fucking voice deepens. You feel much more like a man on Proviron. It's good shit, dude. Not home. Ryan, what's your stance on optimizing all death markers from a young age with pharmaceuticals? When does it turn into obsession with death? Yeah, like that Brian whatever guy. I think that, you know, you want to minimize the amount of pharmaceuticals you take, because no matter what, like most of them are going to cause some degree of oxidative damage. Yeah, it's like, you know, I was just talking to my girlfriend about this, and because we were discussing a situation in which somebody I knew was taking herpes simplex virus 1 suppression medication, and it had landed them in a place where there was a fucking serious set of neurological side effects via one of its metabolites that ends up staying in the system for 7 to 10 days. And the dude was like dizzy and off kilter, and there was like just really fucked up weird symptoms to the point he thought he was having a stroke. And that's just fucked up. this industry, they can't figure out, like, for 80% of their drugs, how to not cause catastrophic other bad shit that goes on in your body from taking the drug. You guys have seen the commercials, right? For drugs. It's like, they go through all these things and it's like a woman holding her husband's hand and the sun is out and all this shit. Like, you get symptom relief from your psoriasis, but call your doctor if you have liver failure, acute renal toxicity, death has been noted in the trials. It's like, what the fuck, man? No fucking way. So no, I don't think this is a good idea because most pharmaceuticals cause a lot of fucking side effects. I prefer Quest just because I think they're both probably the same, but Quest is closer to me. There's like 3 locations that are like within 10, 15 minutes. I think they're both same turnaround. Sammy has said that he has read that some people with very low testosterone shots at 50 to 70 milligrams per week feel good, with total around 1,200 and good free T as possible. Well, sure it is. Yeah, because, I mean, look, their total is peaking at 1,200. I've seen people that can peak at 1,200, but they trough really quickly. They trough at day 3, day 4. They're only injecting once a week, by the way. And then they go down to like 700 or 600 or something. Again, estrogen can't accumulate then because it can't accumulate when you're troughing because you have no substrate to convert to estradiol, to aromatize. So yes, this does happen to people. Now, what this classifies them as with 50 to 75 milligrams a week going there are over responders to testosterone. So their 50 to 70 is like 150 to me. I need about 150. Yeah, 150 to get to 1,200 total T on cypionate. So, they're hyper responders. Lowest minimum CDP choline dose when taking uridine, 25 milligrams. Yeah, 70